Do you have that?
No, it's okay. Part 1 has 10 principles, and part 2 of Achilas has 9 principles, and then there's just illustrations.
No, but we're before the principles. We're in the psicha, which is like
the
second
opening.
introduction. Like there was
Okay.
there's a hakdama, I think it was called,
Okay.
and then that what's called the psicha. But first he listed all the losa says you transgress
Oh, I see.
commonly,
Okay.
and now you have the says, so we're up to number 11.
Okay. Thank you.
Yesterday we did 11, which was a Shankachatira, but there's a footnote on 11. Okay? I mean, the Losa say was, Yiras Hashem means that when you're faced with a challenge, you don't do it because you have Yiras Hashem, right? So if someone just freely speaks Lashon Hara, so he's obviously being Mavato, that mitzvah of fearing Hashem. So he says on the bottom, Hago, Uvaskenu b'mitzvah zu, while we're dealing with this mitzvah, Mati l'hazer oid mashmotzer. So says Chavetz Chaim, I'll take the opportunity to be mazer on something else that's very common. Bavaneseno Rabin, Ma'avar Isa Haras Moitzi Shem Shamayim Levatola. There's an Isser of saying Hashem's name Levatola. The Nafkum Kala Seizu, that's learned from this mitzvah say, as Hashem Elkecha Tiro. If you use Hashem's name for no reason, so you're over this mitzvah. Kedisa b'tmura, daftalet v'hu k'shrei lefarim. Now, where are people lax with this? K'shrei lefarim she'echad miskan al davar shenasa shloi kedasa Torah. There's a person he's full of in the what?
He's indignant.
He's upset. Okay. What's the word? On something that was. What's that?
Indignation.
Sounds right.
Okay.
What does Rabbi Shine say? Okay, in any case, on something that's done, not a P-Torah. Whether it's Ben Adam Lamokim, Ben Adam Lachaberu, Motzihu. He says, and it's common, Babaniseno Arabim, Bivale haLashon, those who are not careful with their speech, Achakach, Misloitzitzim Olav. So Bali haLashon make fun of him. Now that firm guy, and get off his whatever. Lema b'lashon like, and they make fun and they say, "Ru pliny, you see such a guy. Gamu lova shalav lefanim esmil hayira. He's taken on the cloak of Yiras Hashem. Gamu kinas Hashem tzavakos, and look how he's taking up Hashem's battles. Well, who ba'atzmai chayti yosef pliny? He's a bigger sinner than the other guy. Stop this phony business. And they say, okay, no Lashon Hara about him. He does this, he does that. Now, the person who's mocking this Jew who stood up for something Torah, right? He stood up for a Torah principle. We could say about him that it's in a perfect example of Averigaris Averis, because of the fact that the guy spoke Lashon Hara, which is very chamor. He also, it brought him to be over on the Isar Shem Shemalatovah, the Tzvakos Gamkein who Michiva Shem Hashem Chokim. It's one of Hashem's names that you're not allowed to raise. The Shem Tzvakos Afil B'loi Shem Hashem. It doesn't have to be Hashem Tzvakos. Gamkein Shem Gomor Tzvakos on its own is one of the 7 names of Hashem Shem Chokim. Uraya says Chavetz Chaim, proof from the Gemara and Shvu. It's by Mishnah. Mashbieni Aleichem B'chulu B'Tzvakos. The Gemara doesn't ask any questions about it. So you see from the Mishnah that that's considered Hashem's name. And he is using Hashem's name for no reason, right? This person who's mocking. We know the words of Chazal, the tremendous punishment for someone who does this. On this, for this, he's chayiv to be excommunicated. Ubali Dianias, it brings them to poorness, poverty. Chas v'shem knis b'nedarim. Da'aftaina m'beis ayin sham. And Hashem nafshi yichak mizemoid. So he says that this is, I guess, this is a common expression that people throw out, but they're using Hashem's name, and therefore he's over on this Easter. Okay, so now we go to number 12. To top this all off, over bezaz mancha sipulash and harachilas. Now this is a scary one. Okay, he says, while you're speaking lashon and rechilas, you mean over on the mitzvah of limud Torah. She mitzvah say gemura. It's 100% mitzvah gemura. Commission first Baram Hilchos Talmud Torah. Ube sefer mitzvah shaloi. If you look in the sefer mitzvah Rambam, mitzvah say Yud Aleph. Ube chol moinei mitzvahs. Everybody counts Talmud Torah as a mitzvah. In case the skar mitzvah asayzun, there's no end. There's no measure of the tremendous reward for this mitzvah. Sheishkula keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. As we know, Talmud Torah is equated to all the mitzvahs. Kamashon Farash Mishnah Depeya, we say it every morning. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam will be Yishalmi Perik Aleph Depeya. Halacha Aleph. Shkol HaMitzvahs Ein HaShavitz the Dibuch Min Torah. All the mitzvahs are equal to one statement of Torah. Well, the Hefach, opposite. Oynish Bitula Shakul Keneged Kol HaAveinis. The Aveira of Bitul Torah is equal to all the Aveiras. Kamashon Chazal. If you look in the Medrash, Eicha Rabasi, Vita Kashvach al Oven Avodah Zar, Vigila Rice Shrichas Daman, V'lei Vita al Avodah Bitul Torah. So now, Ushari's manim lefa'amim yetsa adam nakim yitza oven. We didn't show Milo. It says at other times during the day, you could, so to speak, come clean. You could be excused from the avera. Why? You're busy with your parnasa. You're allowed to do your parnasa. So if you're busy with your parnasa, you don't transgress the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. If you're planning and making, looking for ideas how you can get your livelihood. But when you're speaking lashon hara and rechilas, what benefit will he have for his parnasa? And while he's saying the lashon hara, we already know that he's over many lavin. Now, as he's saying, besides the mitzvah say of Talmud Torah, he says there's also lavin. The Smag says that you shouldn't not learn Torah. I say the Torah. Whichever way you could do the mitzvah of Torah, imud lamdan gadol. Let's say he's a big lamdan, if he didn't move though, so then he could be mekayim by learning be'iyun. V'af imu yisheina lamdan. He's a simple person. Kam yochel u'mitzifrei kodesh. I'm talking loshen Ashkenaz b'zmanenu. Says so. Then he could learn the svarim that are translated into Ashkenaz, Yiddish, German. That was available in his times. Little did he know about art scroll. Today, there's no excuse to anyone to say, I can't learn. I'm not capable of learning. You got, everything's available. Learning these forums develops your yiras Hashem. So while you're speaking at the time of lashon hara, when I'm eating, I'm allowed to eat. When I'm working on my parnasa, I get parnasa. Whenever you're doing something justifiable, you're not transgressing the isur of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. But he says, but when you're speaking lashon and rechilas, so at that time you could be learning Torah, and therefore you're transgressing the chiyuv of Talmud Torah. We say this in our David. In our culture, we grow up with it's a treifa concept, right? Like, you go to work, when you come home, now it's my time. I put in my day, now it's free time. But it's not true. Whenever you have free time, you have to learn Torah. There's no free time. If you need to relax, okay, you need to relax, But there's no such thing as that I'm done for the day, and now I'm free. No such thing. Whenever you could learn Torah, yeah, I have a mitzvah say to learn Torah. So therefore, it says the whole time when you're speaking Lashon Hara, you could be learning Torah at that point. You can't justify the Lashon Hara by saying it's for my parnasa or something like that. And therefore, you're transgressing this mitzvah. He says, I saw written the same thing in the name of the Gra. It says, and whatever, right? And then in the future, there's a din and there's a cheshbon. So it seems to be repetitious. There's din and there's cheshbon. That's a double payvish. Din hainu al averis atzma. The din is for doing the aver itself, says the Gra. You get judged at the end of your life for the din. That's for the aver you did. You get judged. But cheshbon, the cheshbon is that they make a cheshbon hainu shemachasher imoy beis hadin alzman she'over avera. They prosecute you. They make a cheshbon about the time that you were doing the avera. You could have done a mitzvah at that time. So you're held responsible for that time. Besides the actual avera, what will we answer? What are we going to answer? If Hashem only makes a cheshbon with us for every moment, okay, every word. If you learn a parak Mishnayos, if you learn a parak of Mishnayos, or Daf Gemara, or one page of Gemara, mitzvahs, you're fulfilling hundreds of mitzvahs. If so, we calculate the thousands of words of Torah, that each one of those words is tremendous mitzvah that we went and we were mavatal. We connect them with Knasu Kama Lofam Vanish Labitum Mitzvah say the Talmud Torah, Beis Hazeh Gufa. And in their place, instead of doing the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, these thousands of mitzvahs, instead of doing them, instead I did thousands of being mevato that mitzvah. I think somewhere the Chofetz Chaim says that you make a cheshbon if you say the parak, the Mishnah of Elul Dvarim has 50 words and you could say it 4 times in a minute. So that means you have 200 mitzvahs. And certainly, if not only were you mevato the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, but at that time, who perish atzmin Torah, at the time that you're separating yourself from learning Torah, you fill it up with such averis. Because every story of degradation, of gnus, it's a separate law. So say, come remember Makkos. As Gemara Makkos says, if you tell someone, don't wear this, it's shantness, and he does it, and then you tell him again, it's another love. It's not like one big love. He says, if we just calculate this avera of not learning Torah at every moment that you were speaking Lashon Hara, this rabble of kama miras lavin resin, you have hundreds of lavin in esin. And if you also bring into the cheshbon havi lavin resin acherim, all the lavin and esin that we've been discussing in these pages, so it's quite a cheshbon. You have to be careful not to speak this wasteful words, and instead use it for Talmud Torah. Okay, there was a lot of footnotes here, so we're going to leave that for the next days to come back, okay? And now let's just do some Shmirash haLashon. So in Shmirash haLashon, when Shar has Zechira Perik Dalid, I think we're on Chav Gimel Tishrei, right?
Mhm.
Brian?
Yes.
Okay. It's also a bit long. I won't do the whole thing now. Hago, umayofa militzas chachamenu zal. So how nice is the Melitza, the way Chazal reflected on this Kibash and explaining native. Nimtza boy kol simanu shamu Chazal b'yom perik ches. And it's Chazal compared someone who speaks Lashon Hara to someone who was bitten by a rabid dog. Right? That's what we said last time. And at the end, he had said, because someone who's bitten by the rabid dog has no refuah, and the one who speaks Lashon Hara, Chazal says, someone who's accustomed to this Avera also has no refuah, has no takana. But he develops it a little more, because he says, if you look at all the signs, Shamu Chazal b'yayim perches b'kel shaitan, whereas all kind of simanim that you could recognize if this dog is rabid. And because of that, you also get there's a ruach tuma. The Gemara says, the Gemara says, there are 5 things that are said about a kelev shaitan. He walks with his mouth open. Saliva drips. His ears are like bent down. His tail hangs between his legs. He walks on the sides of the street. 6th thing, he barks, but you don't hear the bark. Mistaken, it says if someone rubs against the dog, he endangers himself, but if he's bitten by the dog, he dies. What's the refuah for someone who, I guess, came in contact with the rabid dog, even though he wasn't bitten? So Gemara says in Hebrew, it's Yivshai Pugad, we shall take off your clothing, we came off, throw it in front of you, in front of the dog, v'yaretz, and run away. Vatanavar. That's the simanim of a kelev shaitan. And like he's saying, the Chazal compared a Baal Lashon Hara to a kelev shaitan. He says the Chazal shows very well their mashal. Aleph Pei Pasuach. The first sign of a kelev shaitan is his mouth is open. That's the easy one, right? The Baal Lashon Hara. So he's talking. He'll speak about anybody. Number 2, we write native saliva drips. Since there's a ruach ra on the dog, so I guess this is the expression of that. And the scabral of ad moed, and that brings out on the dog the koyach of kas and azus that the dog has in his nature. Kemamorim, as Gemara in Beis says, gimel azin hein. Shabachai is kelev. The kelev is called the animal that has the meat of azus, and therefore this ruach ra causes that meat to be expressed. And that is expressed by the fact that the dog tries to attack anybody who comes his way. And because of that, his saliva is like, it's like when someone, is thinking of a good steak. So his saliva goes into high gear, right? So the dog, saliva, because he's expressing his kas and azus, and he's going to go after anybody that comes his way. Therefore, the night of Rivri will pracha Pivposuach, and top of that being that the dog's mouth is open, so it's not containing the saliva. Ve'en miskeres la'avir l'sakivshan. So there's nothing holding the saliva from staying in. Kenu derech haLashon Hara kavua. This ragesh tamer akomi shi'ala barucha. So too is the nature of a Baal Lashon Hara. Again, Baal Lashon Hara kavua, that he gets upset at anybody that crosses him. Voidesh was in India, okay, and therefore he's being compared. That's a parallel to the Rira Noiter. Voidesh was in Yoisanois is taking another step. Hukumash Akel Shait the Dako Lintoif Riro, Vulechas Akel. It drips, his rear drips, Ashahi Bavade Mu'usad Moid, and that's the Leichas Akel of the moisture of the dog. That's very most, so we're probably Kelv Shaita, specifically. So from a Kelv Shaita. Then came Komokim Shereshon Kelv Shaita. He says, so in any place where the Kelv Shaita was, I feel like he's going for just a few moments, Minkar. You could see that there was a rabid dog. I feel after he left, you could see the saliva that had dripped from the dog's mouth there, being that there's so much saliva dripping, right? Now that's a disgusting thing, that saliva coming from the dog. He says, so too, the Baal Lashon Hara is compared to him. Like his mouth is always open like the dog. And he puts his tachanasa, means his bad smell. Wherever he goes, and he leaves a mark from the words he says, the bad mouthing. It leaves a mark, just like the saliva of the dog. Okay, we'll stop here at number 3, and Mitzvah Hashem will continue tomorrow.